This is Megan Moran, canola and edible beans specialist with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Just going to talk a little bit about winter canola survival assessment. I know there's not a lot of winter canola in the ground right now, but if you do have some canola or you're working with a grower that has canola, I think it's important to know what to expect if you go out to the field this time of year at the end of March. It can often look fairly discouraging at this time of year, but canola has an incredible ability to regrow and recover, so we don't want to give up too early on canola. The questions I guess we ask ourselves at this time of year are, first of all, is the plant alive? So I have a few pictures here. In the southern counties like Essex and Chatham-Kent, often the leaves that grow in the fall are retained through the winter and they're still there in the spring. Often as you move a little further north, such as Wellington or Grey County, the leaves that are there in the fall have melted or rotted off during the winter, but that doesn't necessarily mean the plant is dead. So leaf color and leaf area are not good indicators of survival. If you look in the picture in the top right, that plant certainly looks dead. There's no green tissue at the growing point. The leaves are all rotten. And importantly, when you pull the plant up, the roots are mushy and rotten. So that plant is definitely dead. Picture on the left from the same field. Again, the leaves have rotted through the winter, but the growing point is still green. That plant is very much alive. The roots are intact. They're not rotten. So that plant will go on to recover and will yield just fine. In the bottom right is a picture from Essex County, and you can see that the leaves have turned purple, but they're still there, and there's no problem with that plant. It'll be just fine. So here's some examples of a field that, as I say, you come out to the field this time of year and it looks kind of discouraging, but within a week or 10 days, the plants really start to green up and grow. So we don't necessarily make a call right away, kind of wait and see some growth. In that field, we did lose some plants for sure, but the population was strong and it yielded at least 7. We want to get our nitrogen and sulfur fertilizer out as early as we can in the spring. So as soon as you start to see some growth and as soon as the field will carry without you rutting up the field. But in addition to making sure the plants are alive, we want to make sure there is good yield potential there as well. And so this field certainly looks alive, it's green and growing, but when we cut some plants open at the soil surface, those plants really are not healthy and do not have any yield potential. They're all necrotic and hollow on the inside. And so this field was terminated because it did not have any yield potential, and that was the call. So that's what we want to do, cut plants open at the soil surface just to check the inside of the stems to make sure they're healthy. And so often you'll see a little bit of a hole in the center of the stem, and that's not really a problem. But if there's a lot of necrotic tissue and it doesn't look like the plant can move water and nutrients effectively, then it doesn't have yield potential and should be terminated. And other than these photos, I don't really have a great scale to use, but if you think the field looks pretty healthy, there is some damage inside some plants. There's also an option to just reduce your nitrogen rate to match yield potential. So the other thing you might see is heaving. So you can see in the picture here, those tap roots are kicked right out of the ground. And certainly they're trying to grow, but those are not healthy plants. They do not have yield potential and should not be included in your stand counts. This picture was taken in a kind of spongy area of a field in March of last year in the Chatham area. And it was really just a few spots in the field that had heaving. Overall, the field looked good. Okay, so if you used a grain drill to plant your canola in narrow rows, ideally we want 5 to 8 plants per square foot. And so you can use a hula hoop or a square to make those counts. If you have more than 8 plants per square foot, that's totally fine. If you get a really thick stand, you can get skinny plants and maybe some lodging, but that's more of a harvest issue. If you have fewer than 5 plants, so 3 to 5 plants per square foot, even that could be worth keeping if those plants are evenly spaced and healthy. Canola has an incredible ability to branch out and fill in gaps and to meet yield potential at relatively low populations. And some local agronomists that are really familiar with canola would even say 2 plants per square foot can be worth keeping. Here's an example of a field last year that I thought looked pretty thin and maybe wouldn't be worth keeping. We had a lot of winter losses, so 54% survival and about 4 plants per square foot in many areas of the field. But the grower was familiar with canola and its ability to branch out and was relatively comfortable letting this go ahead. Also, it was a really late spring and they just weren't going to be able to get any work done in that field in the spring anyway, and so they let it ride, and it definitely turned out to be the right decision because it was a very strong yielding field. If you used a corn planter to plant canola on wider rows, so 15-inch rows or maybe a twin row scenario, we want to use a tape measure to do those stand counts. A hula hoop or a square doesn't really work. And so these plants per acre are just conversions from the 5 to 8 plants per square foot. So if you have 220 to 350,000 plants per acre, that's right where you need to be for an acceptable stand. On the very low end, if you have about 130 plants per acre and they're healthy and evenly spaced, that could potentially go on to yield strongly. And when we use a corn planter, it's more likely that the plants are all at the same growth stage. So that's kind of a bonus with a thin stand, having everything at the same growth stage.